I never thought that one day, the very neighborhood where I had spent my entire life would become the place where I would face an unexpected battle. Welcome to the Karen Karma channel. Let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below. As a state governor, I was accustomed to tense meetings, tough decisions, and the significant societal issues at hand. But no theory or lesson could prepare me for the reality that, one day, my battle would begin right in my own backyard. That garden was, to me, a part of my life. The towering trees had stood strong through countless seasons, the trunks that my parents had planted long ago, and later, ones I personally took care of. Each tree stump, each branch was tied to precious memories of my family. It wasn't just a green patch of land amidst the busy city, but a part of my family's legacy, a mark of time that I kept carefully. I still vividly remember every morning, stepping out into the yard, smelling the damp earth, and listening to the rustling of the leaves in the wind. I nurtured each tree, worried when winter came, and rejoiced when spring arrived, as each branch once again sprouted new leaves. That garden wasn't just a living space. It was a vibrant memory of my family. But then, just after 3 days of absence, everything changed. I returned one late afternoon, my mind filled with concerns about work and state issues. But the moment I stepped into the yard, I was stunned. I stood frozen, unable to believe what was happening in front of me. "Who did this?" I asked, my voice choking in my throat, unable to hide my anger and disappointment. A neighbor standing nearby looked at me with a confused expression and said, "Karen." She had someone do it. Karen. Karen was not an ordinary neighbor. If you think of a despicable woman, she embodied everything wrong that a community could face. Not only was she the president of the Homeowners Association, HOA, but to her, that position held power like that of a queen in a small kingdom she had built from strange rules and decrees. I had lived in this neighborhood for over 15 years, and I could say that everything was fine until Karen took over. Before that, I had never faced any issues with the HOA regulations, and my life had never been disrupted. But once she became president, it seemed like everything changed. The first time I realized how strict Karen was when I received a warning letter from the HOA. The letter requested that I repaint my garage door because it didn't match the neighborhood standards. "You need to repaint your garage door within 14 days, or you will be fined $500, the letter clearly stated. I stood motionless, reading the words over and over again. My garage door had been the same color for years, even before Karen moved here. I couldn't understand why she suddenly thought it was inappropriate. But I tried to stay calm and called Karen, hoping for a reasonable conversation. "Whitmore, I don't understand. My garage door has been like this for so long. Why does it need to be repainted?" I asked, my voice trying to remain polite. "You don't understand," Karen replied, her tone cold and self-assured. "Your garage door is the color I call outdated. If you don't comply, you'll be fined. Rules are rules." The second time was on a Saturday morning, when I was enjoying a quiet morning inside when I suddenly heard a knock on the door. When I opened the door, I saw Karen standing there, with sharp eyes and a stern face. "You need to mow the lawn every Tuesday," she said without even greeting me. "If the grass gets too high, I'll report you. I won't sit idly by while this neighborhood goes downhill." I couldn't believe my ears. I looked out into the garden, where the grass was only half an inch taller than last week. There really was nothing to worry about. "Whitmore, the grass is just a little tall, and I always mow it regularly. Do you want me to mow it every day?" Karen just stared at me, her face unchanged. "It doesn't matter. If I see the grass too high, I'll report you." And so, each week went by, and Karen found a new reason to send me an HOA warning. No matter what I did, she always found something to complain about. The letters never stopped coming, and I started to feel like I was living in a surveillance state, where every small action of mine was scrutinized by someone who was constantly looking for faults in others. Even my garden wasn't exempt. The trees in my garden were always an obsession for Karen, and not because I didn't take care of them. She strangely hated them, and the reason was truly baffling to me. First, she hated them because they blocked her view. Every time she looked out of the window, all she saw was a patch of green instead of the houses on the other side. Then, she hated them because the leaves fell onto her driveway, making her have to sweep them up. But the biggest reason was really very simple. Karen could never tolerate anyone having something nicer than she did. One day, I was working in the garden when suddenly I heard her cold voice from outside. She called me out and pointed at my trees, her face clearly showing anger. "You need to trim the branches. They're blocking the light from my windows." I stood there, looking back, and saw that my trees were at least 30 feet away from her house. They couldn't possibly block the light from her windows. I glanced at her and then shook my head, refusing immediately. "No, I won't do that. They're my trees, and they don't harm your house." She didn't say anything more, but as I walked into the house, I could feel her sharp gaze from outside. The next day, I received a letter from HOA warning me about not complying with the rules on trees. I knew right away that Karen had something to do with it. She would never give up. Every month, she sent at least one complaint about my trees. Once, she even told me, with an air of superiority, "People can't live in an environment like this. Can't you think of others for once?" I just silently looked at her and said nothing more. But she didn't stop there. And then today, when I had only been gone for 3 days, Karen did something I never expected. She hired a crew to come, and they cut down all the trees in my garden. No permit, no consent from me. They destroyed everything ruthlessly, as if the garden was an offense that needed to be eradicated immediately. I stood frozen before the horrific scene. The whole garden had been completely ravaged, with no trace left of the lush trees. Seeing me return, Karen walked over from a distance, arms crossed, with a smug look on her face as though she had just accomplished a great feat. She kept looking at me with a victorious smile. "It looks much better now, doesn't it? I've done you a big favor." I stood silently for a moment, taking a deep breath to control the anger building inside me. I looked her in the eye and smiled faintly, a smile without any joy. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life, Whitmore. I've warned you many times. You'd better follow the rules of the HOA. And I am the HOA. With that, she laughed out loud and walked away as if she had no remorse for me or my precious garden. I am not someone who enjoys conflict, but this time I couldn't let it go. My heart was full of frustration and determination. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, carefully flipping through the pages of the state law protecting trees. Every sentence, every word in it was like undeniable evidence. Karen had broken too many laws to be forgiven. She had willfully damaged my personal property, which was not just an intrusion, but also a reckless act, a serious violation. She had cut down the tree without a permit. And even worse, that action had caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage to a property protected by the law. I sighed, feeling that this injustice could not continue. The next morning, I decided to take action. I couldn't let her continue thinking she could do whatever she wanted without facing consequences. I called an emergency meeting with the city council. When the council members sat down, I didn't say a word about being the victim. I simply asked them to review a serious violation that needed to be addressed. "This is a blatant infringement, and you cannot ignore it. This action must be investigated immediately," I said, my voice calm but resolute. 3 days later, I knew Karen wouldn't easily let things go. She received a summons letter notifying her of a city council meeting to investigate her violation. However, Karen showed no signs of worry. On the contrary, The smugness in her eyes made me even more determined. When I, along with the federal council members, went to her house, Karen sneered, her voice full of contempt. You think you can do something to me, Mark? You're just an ordinary citizen. I have connections all over this city. Everyone knows me. You can't fight me. I looked her straight in the eye, and at that moment, I smiled knowingly. Whitmore, you may have a lot of connections, but what you don't know is who I am. I looked straight into her eyes, my voice firm. A federal council member stepped forward and asked Karen to cooperate with them on the tree cutting matter. Mrs. Whitmore, I demand that you explain the destruction of personal property owned by Governor Kendi. Karen's sneering smile immediately disappeared. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. What? The governor? Yes, Governor Kendi, Mark Kendi. She froze, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Her face turned pale, devoid of any color, as if she had just seen a real nightmare. Her slender fingers trembled as she placed them on the table, trying to cling to her last bit of composure. Why you? You are, Karen asked, her voice trailing off, as if searching for an explanation for this unbelievable situation. I didn't rush to answer. The feeling of control made me comfortable, and I leisurely sat down in the chair across from her. Glancing at the case file in front of me, a strange but proud sense of power swelled within me. Mrs. Whitmore, you have intentionally damaged my property, and I have enough authority to enforce justice. You cannot escape this, I said, my voice steady yet cold. At that moment, everything changed in her eyes. Her smug smile disappeared, replaced by panic that was evident in every feature of her face. She couldn't accept this. She couldn't believe that I would dare to face her and make such a harsh judgment. No, no way. Karen stammered, her lips trembling. What? No, I didn't know. You might not have known, but the truth is, you have broken the law, I continued, unfolding a piece of paper and placing it on the table. A $50,000 fine for violating the tree protection law. And you must replant all the trees you destroyed at your own expense. Karen went silent, as though struck by a heavy shock. She slowly looked down at the numbers on the paper, the words clearly written like an irrefutable verdict. Her whole body trembled with a mix of anger and fear. No, no way. How could this happen? I can't. I can't afford this, she yelled, her eyes wide with fear. She began to walk towards me, her hands raised as if to beg, but I didn't move. That is what you will face if you continue to violate the law. You may also face a civil lawsuit with damages up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, I said, each word like a sharp warning. Karen tried to appear calmer, but my words had left her powerless to resist. She knelt before me, her eyes begging silently. Please, please don't. I'll do anything to fix this. I can't, she stammered, but no one stood by her. The entire room was silent, no one feeling sympathy. Her arrogance before had now become a burden. She used to pride herself on being able to do whatever she wanted, but now she faced complete destruction. No one could help her at this moment. I don't need your pleas, I replied coldly, my eyes fixed on her. The tree she had cut down was not just a part of the garden. It was a part of my family's memories, something I had cherished for years. You will have to pay for this. Soon after, the police arrived. They entered the yard, their faces stern, and she began to retreat, trying to justify herself. But no one was willing to listen. He's wrong. I just did it my way, she shouted, but Karen's justifications couldn't save her. You must pay for your actions, one of the officers said firmly. The next day, Karen became the laughingstock of the entire neighborhood. Stories about her spread quickly, and no one wanted to engage with her anymore. Neighbors no longer looked at her with friendly eyes, and they avoided her when they saw her. Karen had once been someone everyone feared, but now she was just a figure of shame. The sight of her having to sell her house to pay the fine left me with a sense of irony. She moved away, no longer seen in this neighborhood. I no longer had to worry or fear whenever I encountered her. She had left, disappeared, too afraid to return. No one wanted her back. When Karen left, I no longer felt anger or hatred. Instead, I returned to my garden, the one she had destroyed. I began to restore the garden, step by step, bringing back what had been ruined. In the days that followed, I spent more time in the garden. Each time I watered the plants, I felt as though I was nurturing not just the trees, but also hope for a brighter future. Every new leaf, every branch that stretched out was proof of my belief in recovery. Justice might come slowly, but it always comes. And just like the trees growing, I believe that life will always have fair rewards, even in the hardest of circumstances. Has your life ever been disturbed by troublesome neighbors like Karen? Leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Karen Karma channel.